This year we decided to focus on the work of Joan Jonas as a key part of our BMW Tate Live exhibition, in conjunction with Joan's retrospective in the galleries upstairs. And what's been very exciting about the live exhibition throughout these spaces in the tanks is that we can really show an artist like Joan, whose work is partly installation and sculpture that you would see in a gallery context, and partly performance. And she's a pioneer of weaving these two aspects of the practice together, something that's a fluid way of working, very common to many young artists, but actually in the museum this is a new way for us to try to share that.
The exhibition is also about how do we feel art today. The tentative, if you happen to work through the exhibition, or if you can't, you have to imagine yourself like an animal, maybe like a bird or like a fish. If you dive into the tanks and you swim and you move from one screen to the other and you encounter this magic world that Joan has been building on throughout 50 years. If you enter the exhibition in the galleries on level 2 in the Blavatnik building, which are more conventional galleries, you will feel, we hope, a different show. You begin from her studio, from her loft, where she lives since the early 70s, and you encounter the props and the masks and the objects she collects when she travels. And then slowly you enter your work. You enter in this work that is in my background, which is called the Juniper Tree, that started as a performance for kids and then slowly throughout time was performed again with different collaborators, and finally in 1994 became an installation, as you can see in my back. From this work onwards, then you begin to get, I hope, the idea of the show, which is based on mirroring and echoing. You see a detail, you see an object, you see an image, and that image will reappear somewhere else throughout time, throughout other exhibitions. And the show finally ends in a small work called the Minute Theater, in which you see again her studio, her world in Canada, not in New York, where she spends every summer in Nova Scotia. And you see her apparently opening a window that's not there and saying good night, good morning, somehow suggesting you to begin again and engage again with her practice that is all about reconstructing, going back, and with the possibility of navigating a show as it was like a circle or a spiral. If I was asked to choose 3 pieces, I will definitely say the performance mirror piece number 2 that will be performed throughout 2 weeks in the South Tank is a crucial work. It's a work performed by a group of dancers that are moving screens throughout the space. They're doing it following a sort of choreography, a sort of score. And by moving screen, they are somehow also engaging or reflecting the audience. And it is really interesting because we are scared to see our own image. We are challenged by the fragility of the mirror. And we are also amazed by a movement in space that it's not a usual dance movement. Back then, that work was a sort of statement about gender identity and representation, and also about what an artist is and how an artist can deal with very minimal devices, as a screen in a squarish form, or as a mirror in a squarish form. The second work I think I will suggest you to consider as an important one is Lines in the Sand. Lines in the Sand appeared in 2002 in Kassel, a documenta. It's a work that embodies many other works of Joan, but as an installation, as it displayed in the level 2 galleries in the Blavatnik building at Tate Morden. It's interesting because it shows how Joan has been always swinging between performance, environment, and installation. And it's also very interesting and it's important because it's a strong political statement. The work was made in 2002 at the moment in which the US were moving a second attack to Iraq. And it's all about desert, it's all about sand, and it's about Helen of Troy. And it draws on the myth of Helen of Troy, on the story of Helen of Troy, never have been to Troy actually, but in Egypt instead. So it's about trade, it's about war, it's about the reason why a war is made. But the whole work actually begins from a poem of a wonderful poet, H.D., who was an imagist poet, very much close to Freud and to psychoanalysis, and draws on a strange journey that Joan did to Las Vegas, and a journey that her grandmother did in Egypt at the beginning of the 20th century. So you can already get how many layers are overlapping and shaping this complex but also very beautiful and politically important work. The last work I will suggest to consider a relevant work, and now I'm uncertain between Reanimation and Stream of River, Flight of Pattern, is perhaps the Stream of River and Flight of Pattern. It's a very spectacular work. It's the first work in which the presence of text is not as strong as in the other works. It's the most recent one. And it's really overwhelmingly beautiful, I would say, without fear, because the walls have been painted, the ceiling is covered by a series of wonderful kites that Joan collected in Vietnam, and there are drawings on boards of birds and 3 projections that are the outcome of a series of travels that Joan has done between 2016 and 2017 in Genova in Italy, in Santander in Spain, north of San Francisco, in Vietnam of course, in Singapore, with the intention of depicting the life of birds and birds in captivity and our relationship with nature and animals in particular. It's a very moving work, it's a very, very intense work. As well, it's the most accomplished in the sense that you really see Joan, as she always did, reinventing the medium, playing with shadows, playing with projections, putting herself on screen on a different layer. And of course, you understand how incredibly simple and incredibly inventive she's been throughout her career in constantly challenging given form of art. It's a multimedia installation that is out of any, let's say, canon in the contemporary art practices, and that's the reason why we really admire her work.
This is quite an ambitious presentation around Joan's work because we're working across the conventional exhibition display upstairs, which is more of a chronological evolution. In parallel, 10 Days, 6 Nights, which is the BMW Tate Live exhibition, takes Joan as its inspiration, its central figure. And here, there's a different offer. So maybe once you've seen the exhibition upstairs, understanding the world of Joan, you can get more depth down here with seeing a live performance of Mirror Piece that's performed daily, as well as this fantastic installation called Reanimation, which the soundtrack is composed by Jason Moran, a jazz pianist who Joan has collaborated with since 2005. And this is a large-scale collaboration where she's filmed in Iceland and Norway, and you'll find yourself immersed in her world in a different way that's more on the video and sound side. The space we're sitting in now is going to be home to an ongoing performance every day through the duration of the exhibition by the artist Jemana Emil Aboud, whose videos you can see behind me. And she's working with women who have learned these Palestinian stories in the oral tradition, which is passed from grandmother to child and on. And it's a kind of evocation of a lost territory in Palestine. And in the delay piece, which you can see next week on the river, articulating the whole scene of the Thames, Joan has figures on either side trying to communicate with each other using very rudimentary means like clapping wooden blocks, shouting to each other with a megaphone. And it's kind of beautiful to see this in the age of the mobile phone, where people trying to reach each other using simple objects, the kind of language you also see in the minimal sculpture.
Joan Jonas' background is sculpture, but is art, actually modern sculpture. And of course she's been educated in working through museums and trying to navigate as much as possible the history of contemporary art, and therefore she had to learn how to draw, she had to learn how to sculpt, she had to learn how to relate her own body to space. She never actually gave up to her background, and she never gave up to, and that's very important, to collaboration. So the reason why this show I think is so unusual and so, we hope, interesting is also that you feel that she's been always part of a community, that she's been searching constantly for new collaborators and different collaborators. And she, through this collaboration, she got so much back. So let's say we've got a selection of masks and props in the first room of the show. And if you pay attention, you see that some of the masks are also present in the minute theater opposite, the first one she did. So you can see a sort of dialogue, and this is the dialogue we wanted between object and props that she got from friends and she collected, and her own work. So I think this is the answer, actually. The answer is how to establish or how to navigate a practice that is based on never giving up to learn, and never giving up to listen, and never giving up to collaborate.
What we tried to do in the BMW Tate Live exhibition was to show a range of Joan's work, the props that she was using from her performances, to demonstrate that sculpture is not only an object to be untouched, on a pedestal in the gallery, but it could be an instrument to use in a ritual live situation, shared in a different way. Joan's had a presence, I think, continuously, especially since she was shown again at Documenta by Okwi and Weezer in 2002. Her work has been influential amongst artists for a much longer time. I think what particularly resonates with the young generation is that Joan was an early adopter of technology. She bought a Portapak camera when she went to Japan in 1970, and immediately she was fascinated by this relationship between the recorded image and real presence. And I think it's something that we're all very familiar with in the age of the smartphone and social media. But she was investigating that critically from the 1970s. Joan has a very interesting relationship to history and time because she doesn't believe it's a reenactment, because she says in a way the piece was never dead, it didn't need to be revived. She'd done it over the years a couple of times before, and she would always work with the documents, the photos, the drawings that she made, and reinterpret them in the present. So for her, it's a bit more like a musical score or a choreographic score, that I think it lives and it can be reenacted. It wasn't only about an original that, can't be accessed. I think one of the reasons Joan's work is so rich is because although she's using the newest technology, she's always reaching for these ancient myths that bind human experience and looking for things in common between a story from Iceland, maybe a Chinese myth, and weaving it into stories that she imagines herself. So storytelling is key.
That's it. Don't go away. We'll be right back.